It's the E-commerce Master Plan podcast. Here to help you solve your marketing problems and grow your e-commerce business. Cutting through the hype to bring you inspiration and advice from the e-commerce sector and beyond. Here's your host, Chloe Thomas.
Hello, welcome to this episode of the E-commerce Master Plan podcast. I'm Chloe, the creator and host of this award-winning show, and it's my aim in every episode to help you find ways to improve your e-commerce business. So thank you for tuning in, and I'd love to know how the show helps you. Just let me know via social media, Twitter or Instagram, with the hashtag #EcomMasterPlan. So that's ECOM for the ecom bit, and then masterplan, all one word. So ECOMMASTERPLAN. Nearly forgot how to spell it then. Worrying, isn't it? Anyway, we've recently had a flurry of reviews on Apple Podcasts. So over the next couple of episodes, I'm going to start off by thanking some of those reviewers because I really appreciate it when you put us a review on Apple. And they're a global bunch of reviewers, which I guess is not surprising since this show's listened to in over 60 countries every week. All time, it's about 140 different countries. But each and every week, you guys are listening in from over 60 different places, which boggles my brain. Where are we going to start with these reviews? Well, the first reviewer we're going to thank is Bruce in Canada. And I've picked him because our guest today is Canadian. So that was quite a nice Canadian link there. So huge thank you to Bruce for this lovely 5-star review. Here we go. There's so much to learn on this show about how to build your customer base and improve customer retention. There's a terrific roster of guests who share terrific tips about the many ways to acquire customers for your online business or how to use online methods to grow customers for your bricks and mortar biz. Tons of wisdom shared here. Thank you, Bruce. In today's episode, we're getting into email marketing, subject lines, artificial intelligence, all those kind of algorithm stuff. We talk about scale. We talk about lots of different things. There's some really cool top tips as well. Do stick around and listen to all of that. But before we get to that, please do check out our sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by Klaviyo, the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for email and SMS messaging. Whether you're launching your e-commerce business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo gives you the tools to get growing faster. That's why it's trusted by over 38,000 e-commerce brands. Build your contact lists and emails that pop and create marketing moments that build valuable customer relationships over any distance. Get started for free today. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. This episode is brought to you by NS8. If you run an online business, you probably deal with chargebacks and fraud. Last year alone, businesses like yours lost billions of dollars because of order fraud, and that number is still climbing. NS8 is a comprehensive fraud prevention solution that combines behavioural analytics, real-time scoring and global monitoring to protect your storefront from fraud. They do all this and seamlessly integrate with your store without the need for coding. Start protecting your business with a free 30-day trial of NS8. Go to info.ns8.com/masterplan today. That's info.ns8.com/masterplan. And now to introduce today's guest expert. Parry Malm is the CEO at Phrasee, and author of The Language Effect, Why AI-Powered Copywriting is a Marketer's New Best Friend. I've been a consumer of Parry's email marketing, subject line and copywriting wisdom for many years. I think it might be a decade now. So it's a complete pleasure for me to be able to get him here on the show so as he can share some of that wisdom with all of you. Hello, Parry.
Hey, Chloe, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited to talk copywriting on the show because I think it's neglected. But before we get into that, can you tell us all a little bit about how you got into this crazy world of e-commerce?
Yeah, I'm a career marketer. I worked brand side and I worked vendor side for a long time. And my studies back in the day, I studied computer science and linguistics and marketing. And all through my career, I'd be trying to figure out what the right message was for my audience at any given time, regardless of what industry I was in. And I was constantly sort of trying out to build models to predict what kind of language would work well in a given campaign. And then, go back about 6 years, I was working for an email marketing software company. And I was looking around the market, and there's like 1,000,001 different technologies out there to help you like send out emails, to be a CMS for your website, to automate this, that, and the other. And all of them were like focusing on the operational efficiencies of marketing, but not a single one of the companies out there were focused on the message and optimizing the message. And this was left to be the sort of black art of your fancy suit wearing Don Draper types. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. What if we apply like the same level of scientific rigor to the language we use in our marketing campaigns that we do to every other aspect of the marketing mix? And from that's when the light bulb moment happened. Fast forward 5 years, and now I'm the leader of a pretty awesome company that's got a great group of people in the team that provides like an unbeatable technology to the wider world. But I'm not going to shameless plug you just yet.
No, not just yet. We'll save that till a little bit later. But it is kind of crazy, isn't it? How much time and effort we spend talking about ways of getting messages in front of people and ways of choosing who we're going to get a message in front of, but actually how little time still today we spend talking about what that message should actually be.
You bet. Like, I mean, if you think about it like this, we spend hours and hours and hours to like construct a website or to make a sort of email automation series and whatnot. And we'll create the templates, we'll code them up, we'll drop in the imagery, we'll do all this crazy stuff. And we'll be able to, send out 1 million messages to 1 million people with the click of a single button. But if your message sucks, then it's all a big fat waste of time. And the challenge is we've been so focused on operational efficiencies of marketing, we forgot the crux of what marketing is, and that is getting your message in front of as many eyes as possible. So there's, in some ways, it's a real bummer because the fun part of marketing has been sucked out of it in the last 10 years as we've been focused on all this operational stuff. Now, the majority of marketers' times is spent in different apps and like in their ESP, in their CMS, in their CWP. I just made up that acronym, right? And that's not really fun. And there's a huge opportunity cost to this because marketers, by and large, are pretty creative, cool people who are being given the most mundane, boring jobs. So the opportunity cost of that is you've got your business's most creative people focused on the most boring jobs. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out that something in this equilibrium is amiss.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? We look at the numbers, we look at the stats, but we never really spend time on getting things right. And one of your specialisms is subject lines. And I think about, when I put together subject lines for my own newsletter, it's like something which I spend so little time on considering how much impact it actually has. And despite the fact I know it's so important, it's like we spend all this time working, and retailers in particular, on what products are going in the email, how the graphics are going to look in the email. And then, the subject line is just a throwaway quick thing to do, which is, it's a weird habit everyone's got into, really, I think.
I find that companies sort of fall into one of two camps. One is where the writing of the subject line is delegated to the most junior team member because it's viewed as just a throwaway thing. And that's crazy for the reasons you just mentioned. The other camp are people who create subject line by committee. And this is actually even more dangerous. And let me explain why. So the old way of working, what you would do is if you got, a marketing campaign going out, let's say you're doing like shoes at half off kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. You would send that brief to a copywriter. The copywriter would then write some stuff. They would send it back to you. You would then put in your 2 cents. You show it to your coworker. They would put in their 2 cents. You then show it to your boss. They would put in their 2 cents. And you'd even show it to the CEO, to the janitor, because everybody has an opinion about language. Now, the end version that you wind up going with is the version that was selected by either the most senior person in your company's hierarchy or by the person with the most persuasive argument. So it's basically the person who convinces you that their gut feeling is the best gut feeling. There's a real problem with this because gut feeling is layered with huge levels of cognitive bias. And what we're doing is we're applying our own experiences in life, our own beliefs, our own axioms and mores to subject lines. Now, the problem is at scale, you should never trust a human when it comes to predicting which copy is good and which copy is bad. And the reason is we have all of these biases that hold us back and make us make choices based upon gut feeling instead of actual numbers and science.
Yeah, but it's something which so many of us rely on. I think especially when we're trying to go, you must tell your story, you must get your brand right. Is there not a space in that for gut feeling? Or is it still, should we still be numbers based?
So when people talk about brand voice, it's very important. And I'm a big believer in brand voice. But often when you look at, brand voice and tone of voice guidelines and whatnot, they're very ambiguous, right? What you need to do is you need to be able to codify your brand voice into a tangible set of gates and rules. So by virtue of doing that, once you have your brand guidelines set, you basically have set, in the entire universe of language. If you think about every possible way that you can say shoes at half off, there's literally billions of ways of saying you're selling shoes at half off. You then take that universe down based upon brand voice constraints. Let's say you're down to like a million different ways of saying the same thing, like 1% of the total possibilities out there, right? Mm-hmm. There's still a million ways of saying the same thing, which all adhere to your brand voice, your business model, compliance guidelines, and so forth. What are the odds, first of all, of a human thinking of a million ways of doing it? You just can't. It's not feasible. But secondly, even if a human could think of a million ways of saying the same thing, what's the odds of picking the best one? Is basically 1 in a million. Now, the beauty about using advanced technology is advanced technology can explore this entire space, this million different possible ways of saying the same thing space. And then it can find, based upon predictive models, which ones are the best ones, because it can deal with this amount of data, unlike a human brain.
So we're definitely getting into the world of your book now, and the subject of that, which of course is subtitled Why AI-Powered Copywriting is a Marketer's New Best Friend. So Parry, why did you decide now was the right time to write the book?
One thing, we've been running Phrasee. We launched Phrasee in 2015, so it's been a good few years, and it's a multi-million-pound business. We have operations in the US, the UK, Canada. It's actually a pretty good business. We work with a whole bunch of name brand customers like eBay, Domino's, Groupon, companies like that. But what I really wanted to do with the book was to sort of not talk about the actual technology, because there's a million different technology companies out there, but to actually look at the philosophical and economic underpinnings as to why every marketer in the world needs to be looking at AI-powered copywriting. And the reasons are quite simple. There's a fundamental scarce supply of copywriters out there. We need 10 times as much copy to treat advertising campaigns now than we did 15 years ago with Google AdWords, Facebook ads, emails, SMSs, whatever the hell TikTok is, all that kind of stuff, right? But the supply of copywriters has remained finite. So what people are doing now is they're having this scarce copywriter resource, spending their time writing things like email subject lines and Facebook ads, instead of worrying about their overarching message strategy. So what you need to do is to embrace technology which democratizes access to effective copywriting for the more sort of mundane copywriting jobs, to free up your scarce, incredibly impactful creative copywriting resource to worry about your overarching message strategy. And that's why now is the right time.
So is it a bit like you were saying about brand guidelines and tone of voice are great, but they're kind of like a filter to reduce the options before you give it to the AI, if I understood you correctly. And then what your copywriting team should now be doing is creating more filters to get the AI to perform better. Is that right?
Well, yeah. So basically, I mean, at the outset, you need humans to codify what the ground rules are within generating language, right? So it could be as simple as, we don't use the word awesome, but we do use the word fantastic. Or there's, some more stuff about semantics and syntax and morphology and things like that, which is quite important. But once those are set, those are set. The thing is, like, messaging in general is much more than just a subject line. It's an entire sort of linguistic framework which your whole company adheres to, and it's not just in using Phrasee, but everybody in the whole company. And by setting guidelines for the whole company, then what copywriters should be doing is focusing on the sort of overarching company-wide messaging strategy instead of worrying about a subject line that they have to write 10 of every day, which just seems like a real sort of wasted opportunity for this really intelligent creative resource.
I suppose it's a bit like if we talk kind of Google ads, we don't expect the people running and improving our Google ads to have to actually do the minute by minute bids. We allow the Google algorithm to deal with that for us, the whole bid auction that happens. They deal with that. We deal with the strategy, the bid changes, the what we're actually going to bid on and all the rest of it. It's kind of like bringing the same thing to our email subject lines, to our other copywriting needs, is to go, let's get the humans doing the high level part, and then we'll let the tech take care of the rest.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy there, and it's not one that I've heard previously, but you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, I've met hundreds, if not thousands, of copywriters in the last 5 years, and I've never met a single one who goes, the favorite part of my job is writing subject lines, or is writing Facebook ads or Google ads. Like, that's the sort of lowest of the low stuff that they hate doing in the first place, right? And what they like doing is this more strategic stuff, this higher order sort of copy strategy based stuff, which is what they should be doing, right? So like, I mean, I totally think that the metaphor you just used is a great one. A second one that I've heard when people speak about Phrasee is, like, 20 years ago, when Photoshop first came out, designers throughout the world were decrying it. And you had a bunch of these sort of neo-Luddites who were, using the proverbial hammers to, bash Photoshop down, going, it's going to put us all out of work, and this, that, and the other. And yet, fast forward 20 years, and two things have happened. Number one, those who fought it are probably no longer gainfully employed doing their life's trade. But number two, it democratized access to creative tools. And now there's more jobs for designers than ever before in the history of human civilization. What Phrasee is doing is taking people on a similar journey, where what we're doing is we're democratizing access to constrained creativity for those sort of repeatable copywriting tasks where human effort is effectively wasted. And what we're doing is the same thing to copywriting that Photoshop did to design 20 years ago.
Oh, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. It makes total sense. So, Parry, if someone wants to start taking the power of their copywriting to the next level, to make it AI powered, is Phrasee the only option they've got at the moment? Although, because I know, for the smaller retailer, it's not a sustainable proposition to use Phrasee. So are there other options out there for the smaller guys?
So I'll be perfectly honest. One of the main constraints that small companies have when using AI in most forms is access to large pools of first-party data from which they can build models. And that's what the real sort of constraint is here, where if a retailer is relatively small, then you can't really build a model off of their in-house data. It becomes very difficult. And to be honest, it becomes cost prohibitive. And I'm not just saying this is limited to Phrasee, but with sort of modeling in general. There are some really sort of straightforward things you can do if you want to bring AI into your marketing stack. There's things like high velocity RFM modeling and stuff like that, which you can buy off the shelf. But as far as these sort of large-scale enterprise applications like Phrasee, the state of the art currently relies upon large pools of first-party data to then train those models on. Now, it's not to say that in the future there couldn't be iterations that can be applied to small business. One of the challenges, though, and this is partially a technical challenge and partially a brand challenge, is to use a solution like Phrasee for small companies, we would need to have pooled data. So we would have what's called a generalized model. The problem with a generalized model is that it wouldn't take into account these brand voice constraints that we were speaking about previously. So then you just have this world where you have basically a shared database of language that everybody draws down on. Everybody sounds the exact same. Now, you play this tape out. In the short term, everybody would get an immediate response spike and they'd all go like, this is great. But then consumers would become anesthetized to this sort of homogenous messaging from brand to brand to brand. And any equity you had built up in your brand would just be wasted. In fact, in my book in chapter 9, A Tale of Two Strategies, I delve into this dichotomy in a fair amount of detail. So it's not to say that in the future, this couldn't be democratized further to small and medium-sized enterprises, but the state of the art right now relies upon large data sets.
Yeah, it's a bit like if you're putting AI in place to personalize product recommendations on your site, you've got to have we all know we have to have a certain amount of data for that to work. And the more data you've got, the better it works. And it's exactly the same. But the thing is, if you had to do if you had an algorithm working out what products to show your customers that was based on the data from everyone's website, it's going to be wrong. It's not going to be as good as it can be. I guess the other thing which came to mind whilst you were saying that was, we've all been at conferences. I'm sure you've been asked this. I get asked this quite often, is what day of the week should I send out my email marketing? And we all know if we stand on that stage and we say Wednesday, then potentially the whole industry starts sending on a Wednesday, and then Wednesday becomes the worst day of the week to send on. So you have to base this stuff on your own data. And as you say, you have to have a certain volume before it's worth running those algorithms. Otherwise, you're just not going to get great data back.
Yeah, I realize for the listeners of this podcast who are working for smaller firms, it's kind of a bummer, to be honest, but it just kind of is the way things are. But I really like your point about the day of sending stuff. So that draws upon the basis of game theory, right? And I'm a student of game theory. I studied it at uni and whatnot. I find it absolutely fascinating, and how you can apply game theory to competitive strategy in business. And I think you're absolutely right, where if everybody says Wednesday is the best day, then it will be the best day until it's not. With copywriting, it's the same thing, where if you go, okay, let's use this phrase because this generalized model says we should use this phrase, but then all of your peers and competitors are using the exact same phrase, and all of a sudden it becomes the absolute worst phrase. So the key is to have this constant flow of fresh, diverse content so that you don't sort of fall into this sort of Nash equilibrium quagmire of everybody sounding the exact same, but nobody stepping away from that pack. But I could go on for game theory for hours and hours, and I won't, because I don't want people to fall asleep while they're listening to this.
I don't know. I quite like a bit of game theory, but yes, we shall leave the listener alone on the game theory front for the time being. I have, Parry, one last question to ask you before we head towards the top tips round, which is to emoticon or not to emoticon, if there's any answer to that question at all.
Yeah. So that's a great question. It's something that we've been asked a lot, and we have a lot of data that we can run models on and proclaim definitive statements off the back of it. My definitive statement about using emoji and the like in subject lines specifically is this: 50% of the time, it works every time. And that is the actual science. So here's the thing, like what people want is they want this simple rule set going, if I do X, the outcome will be Y. Whether it's about using emojis, the length of a subject line, using the, a percentage off discount versus not. They basically want going, if I use variable X, Y, and Z, and I turn them all to yes, then my outcome will be positive. The thing is, when it comes to language, a rule set like that does not exist, because there are so many factors beyond what the eye can see. There are so many linguistic parameters which which affect how humans respond to it, you can't break it down just to a few sort of binary rule sets. So what this actually means in practice with regards to the question about emoji is they act as amplifiers to language. Right. So if you're, sticking with the example of subject lines, if your subject line is good in the first place, then using an emoji will amplify that goodness. But if your subject line sucks in the first place, then using an emoji will amplify that suckiness. And that's why half the time it'll work very well, and half the time it won't work well. But to emoji or to emoji is a nonsensical question.
E-commerce Master Plan is supported by some of the greatest companies in the e-commerce sector. Here's a reminder of who they are.
It's safe to say that most of us have been doing more shopping online lately. And if you're an e-commerce brand, that means you might be seeing more first-time customers. But once they've made that first purchase, how do you keep them coming back? Well, that's what Klaviyo is for. Klaviyo is the ultimate email and SMS marketing platform for e-commerce brands. It gives you the tools to build your contact list, send memorable emails, automate key messages, and more. Way, way more. Whether you're launching a new business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo can help you get growing faster. And it's free to get started. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. With NS8's platform, you can monitor shopping activities in your store, keep track of customer behaviour, and get scores that let you know if an order is safe to process or if it's most likely fraud. NS8 takes out the guesswork so you can focus on your business. For a limited time, e-commerce Masterplan podcast listeners can try NS8 free for 30 days. To claim your offer, go to info.ns8.com/masterplan. Again, that's info.ns8.com/masterplan. NS8, fight fraud with intelligence.
It's time for the top tips round.
Okay, we've had the advice on emojis. Now it's time for the top tips section, and I'm struggling to talk because I want to giggle. So, Parry, this section gives me and our listeners some really quick ideas for taking our businesses to the next level. So, Parry, are you ready for the top tips?
Yeah, sure. So let's do it.
Cool. Okay, the book top tip. If everyone listening to this podcast agreed to take Friday off and read a book to make their business better, which book would you recommend?
Well, I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to say two here. Number one, I'm going to say The Language Effect, Why AI-Powered Copywriting is a Marketer's New Best Friend, because I hear the author is super handsome and great at parties. But let me give a second tip also. Now, this is probably a little bit off piece. See, I personally don't really read too many business books because I find a lot of them kind of say the same thing. What I do enjoy reading are books that explain these sort of high economic and philosophical concepts in real terms. And a book that I recommend to everybody is Candide by Voltaire. And it all surrounds the South American gold market and earthquakes in Portugal many, many years ago. What it does is it sets out the underlying theory of scarcity, because people often confuse something being rare versus something being scarce. So something is rare. Let's say like anthrax. Anthrax is very rare, but it's not scarce because nobody wants it. Whereas let's say Tickle Me Elmo at Christmas time. It's a dated example, but just, I can't think of a better one. There's not many of them, but everybody wants them, and therefore they're scarce. And for me, what Candide did is it really outlined the difference between rarity and scarcity using gold in South America in the 17th century as the allegory. So I would really recommend reading that, because it's just, first of all, it's a good book, but it sort of creates this deep understanding of this core economic concept that actually means a lot more than people give it credit for.
What a great recommendation. I love a classic as well. Okay, next up is the traffic top tip. Which marketing method do you either prize above all others or think doesn't get the press it deserves?
I'm going to do it on the flip side, and I'm going to say one which I think is completely overhyped.
Cool.
And that is personalization. People have been going on for the last few years about, we want to create this uber personalized journey from start to finish. Everything is going to be personalized all the time for everybody. And that actually is a load of BS. The only reason why we're talking about personalizing everything everywhere is because nearly every tech company on the planet, every marketing tech company is going, we can offer you personalization technology, therefore you should personalize. Here's the problem. What people are doing with personalization is they're trying to be uber relevant, but individual circumstances are absolutely impossible to predict on a daily basis.
Okay, now for the tool top tip. Maybe a collaboration tool, a social media plugin, a phone app, or just a way of working. Is there a cool little tool that you use that makes you and your team more efficient from day to day?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a crazy answer here. The tool we use is email within our company. And a lot of people go, oh, you got to use Slack, you got to use all this live chat stuff. And that's good in the time and place. But the great thing about email is it's asynchronous. It's not interruption based, and it gives you time to think deeply about a problem, synthesize those thoughts into a structured piece of prose, which then you can send out. People can read it at their convenience, and then you can hold a video chat, a Slack chat, whatever you want to then discuss that piece. When you're purely focused on interruption-based tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams or what have you, it never gives you a chance to think about stuff, and people need to slow down and think more these days.
It does sometimes turn into that rush to see who can answer first and who can get their point across first, I find, like with collaborative Google Docs and that kind of thing. Everyone kind of piles on. So I totally get where you're coming from. Okay, the growth top tip. If you met someone today who's focused on growing their e-commerce business from 100 orders per month to 1,000, what would be your number one tip for them?
Well, honestly, I think if I was a small e-commerce company and I was trying to get more sales, I would really, really nail email marketing. I'm not talking about doing all this crazy personalization stuff and this, that, and the other. Just do a few campaigns a week. Do them really, really well with kick-ass offers, kick-ass copywriting, because you're going to get more orders from your existing base. You're going to get your existing base to then talk to their friends, to their family, to post about you on social media and stuff. And it's the simplest, lowest cost method that is not beholden to third-party monopolies.
Lots of excellent answers there, Parry. Now, before we say goodbye, could you let the listeners know where they can find you, your book, and everything else on the web and social media, please?
Most def. So real quick, for those of you who don't know Phrasee is AI-powered copywriting. So instead of wishing that you could write the best subject line ever, the best Facebook ad ever, you don't need to worry about that stuff anymore, because there's an AI, Phrasee's AI, that does it better than any human on the planet. You can find Phrasee at www.phrasee.co. That's phrase with an extra E. Me personally, Parry Malm, spelled funny, Parrymalm. You can find me on LinkedIn. Bizarrely, there's only one Parry Malm in the world. Twitter is at Parry Malm, and you don't want to follow me on Instagram. I just post a bunch of stupid memes and stuff. And the book itself is The Language Effect, and you can go to thelanguageeffect.com. You can download the first 3 chapters for absolutely free. And I hope you enjoy it. There's a lot of blood, toil, tears, and sweats that went into the writing of it, that went into all of the stories and experiences that me and my coworkers here at Phrasee had to synthesize an excellent piece of content. So I'd encourage you to read it and think about it, and let me know your thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you, Parry. And thanks for being such a great guest on the show. It's been really cool talking about so many interesting things with you. So thank you.
Nice one. Cheers.
Great to catch up with Parry and explore kind of a different take in some ways, a different way of looking at email marketing, a different bit to focus on. I hope you've got some ideas there. Take a look at some of the stuff that Phrasee are doing. Signing up to their email newsletter is well worth doing, because they share some awesome content. And if you want to get your hands on The Language Effect, as well as getting those first 3 chapters free from thelanguageeffect.com, you can also get the ebook and paperback from Amazon. Right then, to get your hands on the notes from today's show, everything that Parry and I were discussing, plus those top tips and links to what we mentioned, along with those book links, then head over to ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast. There you can also add yourself to our email list so you don't miss out on any of the other things I share to help you improve your business. And there's plenty of them that go out in the email list every week. Thank you so much for tuning in to this and every episode of the E-commerce Master Plan podcast. If you've liked this episode, then make sure you check out episode 171. Yeah, we're going back a bit there. But 171, where I share 14 tips that you can use to make your newsletters much more powerful. There's some awesome stuff in there. 14 pieces of awesome stuff, in fact. So that's episode 171 of the E-commerce Master Plan podcast. And if improving email marketing is on your to-do list at the moment, then you should also check out, or get your marketing team to check out, my brand new podcast. It's called Keep Optimizing, and it's available for free on all podcast apps, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, just like this podcast. And because you should be checking that out, because on it we are opening with 5 episodes all about improving your email marketing. I'm joined by 5 brilliant email specialists who share all kinds of different tips and tricks you can use to improve the performance of your email marketing. So go on, check out the Keep Optimizing podcast right now because it's live right now. But I should warn you, Parry was quite against personalization there, and some of my experts are sharing personalization advice on those 5 episodes. So, you're going to have to make up your own mind on that one. Back on this show, back here on E-commerce Master Plan, I do like to bring you a new interview every week. And the reason I do that is because I want to inspire and help as many e-commerce business owners as possible to succeed and thrive with their business. So please do tell the other e-commerce business owners you know about this show because I'd love to help them too. I hope you have a great week and keep optimizing.
Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Master Plan podcast. Find out more at ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast.